I am live, and I have a mic this time. Okay, I'm moving up in this world. There we go. There we go. So, in this podcast is in this stream, as the name suggests, I'm going to be talking about fishing in Tel Aviv and Yafo. I'm talking about more from like an official like how-to video rather than just clips of and itsy bits of other videos on the internet that kind of just have someone fishing but don't actually have anything informal about how to do it. So, with that in mind, let's get into it. So basically, getting there, fly into Tel Aviv airport, simple as that. That's the only it's only main international airport in Israel. So regardless of where you want to go from there, that's the best way of getting off at. But the great thing about Israel is since it is a small country, as I've said in previous podcasts, because of its small size, you can fly into there and then you can easily take a bus from place to place to place. That's the great thing about this country. So from that point, you're literally going to go a little more toward the coast, and along the different harbors, you're basically going to find this fish called the wolffish. I didn't even know this fish existed until I hooked one, so it's all good. And basically staying in Israel, in Tel Aviv in particular, I cannot actually vouch for much because I didn't stay in that exact city. I took day trips in and out, but the group I was with, one of the guys was recommending actually a hostel that was literally on the water, and it was like $20 a night. So, I mean, I can't vouch for it or how good it is, and you'll see in future podcasts when I know I've been to a place, I will say the pros and cons of that place. And yeah, so that hostel, $20 a night, is cheap as you're gonna get. And then from there, you're basically going to have so once you're in Israel, or once you're in Tel Aviv, you've crashed, you've gone over your jet lag, all that good stuff. You are basically you're going to need to grab a few things before you go. So your rod and reel setup is going to be very straightforward. I would recommend a decently heavy bass rod. Like a 6.5 to 7 foot, maybe even like 7.2, medium heavy. I use spinning. You could probably use bait casting and do the same thing. And then that's the rod, and then match it up with the appropriate reel. One rod that I absolutely love for traveling is from this offshoot company on Amazon called Fibling. I will put the link to this rod below. And basically, it's a 4-piece rod. And if you know anything about John B. in the Amazon, he just gets straight up cursed on. He'll check his rods. They'll go through, and for whatever reason, they never come out. Like it's some sort of like black hole that check-in has. But with this, you can literally just take your rod, put it on the long side of your backpack or you're checking in through TSA, and then it just literally slides right through. No problems with that. And rarely any problems with the rods themselves. And they're $40 a piece. So if you use it for one good trip, a $40 investment is nothing. Like the fact that if you go on trips that are thousands of dollars, $40 in a prep rod or in preparation gear should literally be nothing. And then from there, I would recommend light braid. These fish the ones that I hooked are not that big. And we're talking about fish that are 2 pounds maybe. The thumbnail has the image of one of the ones I got. So we're looking at a fish that's like 2, maybe like 3 pounds. Even like the local guy at the tackle shop was like, yeah, these things aren't that big. And a few other things if you want to pack them. So the reel to go with that rod, I was using like a 3,000 size reel or like a 30. One of the reels I used actually was a lever drag reel that Akuma makes. Great drag on that thing. It's under $50, and it's not that big of a reel, but it pairs up nicely with the rod. So you can use it for like bait fishing on some outings if you need to, as well as you can use it for you can also use it for other, so you can also just do normal casting with it. So it's kind of like a great dual purpose reel. And then yeah, so rod, reel, line, I would go with light 20, 30-pound braid with a leader of like 10. I was using 10. You could probably use like 15 maybe on the heavier side. Basically, if you've ever fished for spotted bay bass in Southern California, very similar gear, and it will feel very similar to it. So if you like one, it's the other. Yeah, so then rod, reel, line, lures. Both times I caught this fish, I was using a jig head, about a 1/4 ounce, with a fluke or a swim bait, either like 4 inches, like 4-inch size. So nothing, not that big, basic gear. If you're a freshwater bass angler, you probably already have all this gear. You just need to go arrange it and pack it. And that's the bulk of what I used. Just something to cut your line with, all the other basics, and you're good to go. Great thing, since they're like the flatheads they have in Australia, I'd recommend a pair of like Boca grips, or just something so there's little teeth on them, so you don't need to worry about it. And yes, also Boca grips are great just to have a scale there if you would need it. Along with that, so you have your rod, reel, line, lures you're going to want to throw, other miscellaneous gear, and this can all be done from the shore, by the way. This is not a very expensive, I'm booking a charter out there or anything like that. It is all from the shore. And then basically what you're going to look for when you're finding, so let me clarify the first part of this. Previous to this trip, I was told about a grouper fishery that I never actually did. So this guy at Fred Hall, which is a convention in Southern California, kind of like ICAST, this guy was at one of the pro staff guys in the booth I was schmoozing with him. I was like, I'm going to Israel. I don't know what to fish for in this one area. He's like, there's actually grouper along the jetties that you could fish for, like calico bass and like saltwater bass. I'm like, cool, I'll give it a try. Never got to the jetties. And then I kind of just stuck with what I was doing inside the harbor. And that's one tip I'm going to give just in general. Be open to whatever comes out. So like, you're going to intend to fish for one thing or a few types of fish on a trip, and then you realize that that's not going to be what you want to go do. So you're going to just switch over to something else, and that may be a fun trip as well. And then from that point, what I would say is, yeah, so from that point, I never actually got to the jetty. What I did was I was fishing walls. Both my wolffish came on a cement wall inside the harbor. You would have mullet sitting up top. So like, here's the wall. Here are the mullet up on top. They call them bora there, but bora, they're basically mullet. And you'll see and if you're in the right spot, you'll see like a school of them. And I first got this idea of, I wonder if there's anything feeding on the underside of this school of fish. There's all kinds of other little pinfish style or type species there. Couldn't tell what they were, but they're there. And then, so you'll have your wall, bora, mullet, whatever you want to call them, on top. You can also try to fish for those things. Just get a little piece of bread or something and they'll bite, but I can never hook one of those. And then on the underside, you'll have your lizard. You'll have not lizardfish. They look like lizardfish, but they're not. They're bigger. You'll have your wolffish. That's what they call them here. And then both times that I would get bit were in that exact same spot, right where all those mullet were. That wall, literally bouncing it off the bottom, right next to the wall. The first cast I would throw a lure on it, I would get bit. It was almost like, when you do that twice, it's not a coincidence anymore. It's a pattern. And if I were to go back there and do it again, like 3-4 times, if I did the same thing, it would be definitely a pattern. So I got the same thing twice. And at that point, with all those details being the same, you knew it was more than just it just happened to have gotten bit. It was a saw the fish, he ate it, or didn't see him, but get ready. All the same details. Fish ate it the same way, and you got him. Now, when a wolffish bites, they'll take it and they'll hold on to it for a few seconds. So you have the luxury of, it's not like some species of fish where they'll kind of quickly move at a bait and they'll take it and that's it. With wolffish, you have a luxury of no, they'll hold onto a soft plastic for a little bit. So like when I was getting bit, I'm like, is this a fish? Is it not? Couldn't really tell. I just got a couple little taps, doom, doom, doom. But he was holding on to it they were holding on to it for 2, 3, maybe 4 seconds. So you had a few moments to quickly think about it, acknowledge if it was a fish or not, and then swing. And then it's just a little pop because it's just a jig head. You don't need a big old heavy hook set like you're flipping. You just need a little doom, doom, pop. And that is it. Once you have that one pop, you just fight up to the surface and then make sure your line is decently heavy. Like I said, at least 10, because part of the problem you're going to have is you'll be standing high up and you'll have about 8 or 10 foot of difference between the surface of the water and where you're going to be. So have that in mind with whatever line you pick, with the leader you pick. Just you want something strong enough, kind of like a pier to bring it up out of the water and hold it up. Or what I even recommend, because these fish are decent size, is I would recommend not risking your rod. I recommend just doing like what the guys at the pier do with the line. They'll just pull it up like a rope with the line. I mean, any seconds. Like a rope, grapple, grapple, grapple. There you go. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, so having that in mind, yeah, so once you have your wolffish, there you go. You got them. At that point, they're kind of like I gotta imagine they're territorial because you only get one per. I've only gone one per a day. I gotta imagine if I was better at it, I could just scout them out more. But I've only done 2 days of wolf fishing. That's it. So, considering I only did 2 days, not a bad deal. So you don't need a whole lot of time. And what I'm going to go back to is it's a great thing to do when you just hop into Israel for the first time, because Tel Aviv is a city where it's all there, and it's a great starting point because that's where your airport is. Now, other fun things you can do that I forgot to mention earlier in this podcast that I wanted to mention are a few of the following things. One, you have the Blind Museum. That I would recommend if you can get a tour on it. I'm pretty sure I have the website or the link to the website below. The Blind Museum is basically, they make this whole walkthrough pitch black. Like you cannot see anything. Like good luck trying to find anything in that darkness. And the idea being is they walk you through all these scenarios as if you're a blind person, and you actually feel like I've had mistakes where I've given one of the guides when I did it. It was a couple years ago, but I would give one of the guys like a 200 shekel bill when it was over like the candy bar that was like 20. Just so you guys know, in the States, that's like $20 is, well, 15's like 15 shekels like 4.5. So 20 is probably like $5-6. And versus like the $50 or like the $60 that, wait, no. Yeah, it's like $60-70 that I gave him actually. So no, avoid that. And then from that point on, the other thing I would recommend is if you want a fun like gag, like dad, like goofy dad type thing to go to, The shuk in Tel Aviv is definitely for that. And for those of you who don't know, a shuk is kind of like a meh open market, or in Israel, it's what they call like an open market. If you've ever been to one like in other regions of the world where they're just known. In the States, we kind of have a farmer's market, it's the closest thing, but it's not a farmer's market, depending on which one you go to. But the one in Tel Aviv is more of a souvenir thing. There's all kinds of weird items you can go buy at the shuk there. Like there's an example of one where you have like neon like world leaders on toilets. Like it's some weird stuff. Like weird like weed yarmulkes. Like that's actually a thing there. So if you want to like laugh at stuff like that with like a friend of yours, that's exactly what that shuk is good for. To the T. And anyone who's ever been there watching this will know exactly what I'm talking about. So, from that point, so those are a couple other things I'd recommend you go do. How to fish for the wolffish, or it's what they call the wolffish. Other thing that I just came to my head right now. There was a good tackle shop in walking distance from the spot I fished in Yafo or Jaffa, whatever you want to call it. And the guy speaks almost perfect English, so you don't need to worry about that. And he has knowledge of a lot of the different kinds of sport fish in Israel. He'll help you out, but have in mind, use his shop as a convenience shop. It is not a Bass Pro style place by any means. It is a tiny little 150-foot, or no, it's like a tiny little 12-foot long stand or 12-foot long shop that just goes in. So it's not, and it's part diving. So it's not a very big shop. So be ready to pack stuff. And if you need to go to him for convenient stuff and you want tips from him, great guy. And yeah, so the reason why I bumped into him, I snagged on a bunch of jig heads. That harbor has everything in it. Like I'm talking trash wise. You will encounter anything from like your typical rope. I caught a deep fryer, like one of the baskets you get deep frying in that harbor as well. And let's just say my face was like, what? A deep fryer? Boy. Like that just no. Yeah, it's like rope, docks, all your usual marina stuff. Be ready to snag on it, and especially with open jig heads, you have to be focusing on where your lure is. Going back to the fishing portions, you have to be fishing portion of this podcast, excuse me. You have to be ready and just focus on where your lure is at all times, because it's very easy to sneeze, miss it, it sinks, and you're losing your lure. You kiss it goodbye on a piling, a rope, I don't care. It's something out there. Anything else? Yeah, that's about it. Israel's a great, like I said, past podcasts I did. Great trip, great place to travel, and this is a fun little fishery while you're there. All right, have fun, guys.